Madame Mayhem, the Mormon in chains scandal, the temptress who invaded the church, a sex serpent in disguise, the sex-obsessed beauty queen, call girl turned kidnapper, the evil seductress. Just some of the names used to describe the subject of this episode. Joyce McKinney. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Well, I'm good, but last week I lost my voice, which is a really annoying thing to happen when you're a podcaster, to have no voice. I woke up last week and tried to speak, and absolutely zero sound was coming out. As the week went on, it's got better and better, so my voice might sound just a little bit different in this episode. I went through a period of sounding like a really shit Simpsons character, but I'm coming out the other side of it now, so it might sound a little deep at points. At points, it may just go really high and sound like my voice is breaking again. It's definitely not. So, yeah. But apart from that, yeah, I'm good. So this episode is one story, and what a fucking story it is. It's absolutely incredible. Before I get to the story, I'd just like to do some shout outs. I've got a list of 10 people to shout out here because I realised I didn't do it in the last episode. So I would like to say a big hello to Tamara May, Maria Burns Sullivan, Maria Christofidelis, what an excellent name that is, Roseanne Sinclair, who you'll know from California Dreaming podcast, and if you're not listening to that podcast, what are you doing with your life? Laura E. Skaggs, Catherine Talmo, Z. Mallon, Sue Gilbert, Alison Shields, and Karen Martin. Hello to you all, and thank you for your continued input to the podcast and for your continued support. Okay, we're going to get into the story of Joyce McKinney. Okay, let's go. Alright, who was Joyce McKinney? Well, she was born in Avery in 1949. Avery is in North Carolina, USA. Joyce grew up in a small town in North Carolina. She was an only child, and both of her parents were teachers. Now, this next fact, it's worth remembering about Joyce. Joyce has a genius level IQ. She was put through acceleration programs at school because from a very young age, teachers were very aware she was operating well above. In terms of intelligence level, she was operating well above anyone else of her age. When I unfold the story of Joyce for you and what she goes on to do, it might not sound like the work of a genius. I mean, it's certainly, some of it is questionable, whether you might think genius or idiot. But some of the things that she comes to do are so strange. I wonder if Joyce is one of these people who walks the line between being genius and madness. You know those kind of, that idea that actually there's certain people whose IQ is at such a level that actually, yeah, they're completely fucking bonkers, but also, they're also slightly genius. Well, just hold that idea as we go through the story of Joyce. As a teenager, she was energetic, she was a cheerleader, and she was a drum majorette. She graduated with both a bachelor's degree from East Tennessee University and a master's degree in drama from the University of North Carolina. Again, having studied drama, you'll see that comes into play in a lot of what Joyce goes on to do in her life. During college life, Joyce lived with a Mormon family and she converted to the Church of the Latter-day Saints. Joyce will say later on that this was because the family she was living with convinced her that this would be the only way for her to meet a reputable and decent and good young man. She believed this, so she thought, yeah, okay, that's fine. That's okay. I'll convert to becoming a Mormon, and that way I will meet a decent young man. So, whilst a part of her wanted the life that would come with being part of a Mormon family, so she would have, a good, decent husband, they would have children, she would have a nice house, she would always be part of a community, Joyce had another side to her. She had a desire to be a beauty queen, and she had the aspiration of becoming a model. Now that is not really very Mormon at all. So what does a Mormon life involve? Now here's the thing, I'm not going to pretend that I know everything about being a Mormon. I don't, okay? And I think it would be really wrong of me to try and truncate everything that I think that it's about and give you a small idea of it that's easily digestible. I think there's a lot of things involved with being a Mormon. It's if that's your chosen practice, if that's your chosen faith, then there's lots and lots of things that come with it. But there are certain things that we can use for this story that are going to help us kind of unpack what happens with Joyce. One of the things massively is to do with sex. So in the Mormon faith, sex before marriage is banned. You're not allowed to have sex until you have met the person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with. And then once you're married, you can have sex. There's a lot of Mormons who walk around the streets. They do a lot of that missionary work. And again, this is going to become a part of the story later. But there's a lot of Mormons who do the missionary work where they will walk around and they'll stop people in the street and they'll ask them about the faith that they have. Do they have a faith? If not, perhaps why not? Have they thought about joining Church of the Latter-day Saints? That's just something that happens, I think, in every major city in the world that's existing. I've certainly been stopped in Glasgow at least 2 or 3 times by, and they're always lovely. They're always the nicest of people. It's actually quite nice to have a chat sometimes. They just, they stop, they ask. It's not aggressive. It's respectful. It's just, they just want to stop. Obviously, they have an agenda, but at the same time, there's something about when they stop you in the street, it doesn't feel threatening. Sometimes it can be annoying when you're just trying to get round your daily, you're just trying to get from A to B when you're, going to work, back from work, going from this place to that place. But at the same time, if you're a kind, gracious person, sometimes you will just give them 2 or 3 minutes. I must just, before we continue with the story, I must just tell you about, oh my God, I must tell you about my friend David, who, right, what's the best way to describe him? Right, he is, I'm going to put this in the politest way I can. He's living his best life as a single gay man living in a major city. So he gets stopped by 2 Mormon gentlemen on his way to work, and they start to have a conversation with him. And he says, "Oh, the thing is, I'm running late for work. I can't really stop and talk. But how about, we continue this conversation tomorrow? Perhaps we could go for a coffee." So he sets up a meeting with these 2 guys, these 2 Mormon guys from the street, sets up a coffee date with them the next day. So I see him in between this, right? I see him in the evening, and I said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And he went, "Oh, I'm meeting 2 Mormons at 12 o'clock in such and such a cafe for a chat." And I said, "Why are you doing that?" I don't understand. Like, I wasn't judging it. I just was like, why are you doing that? And he said, it's because they're both absolutely gorgeous. He was like, so I think I'll meet them at 12 o'clock and I'll just see what happens. I was like, are you some sort of idiot? Honestly, I think he was thinking, I'm going to have myself a lovely threesome with these two Mormon men who stopped me in the street. But he went along for the coffee. So I phoned him in the afternoon and I was like, what happened? And he was like, yeah, nothing really happened. We just sat and we just talked about stuff. And then like they said they had to go. I was like, yeah, I bet they did. You fucking idiot. Did you actually think for a second that was going to evolve into the sex situation that you thought it was going to be? Fucking hell. Okay, so back to Joyce. So Joyce, in order to fulfill the part of her desire to still be a glamour model or compete in beauty pageants, she moved to Wyoming. And in 1974, she won the title of Miss Wyoming. She went on to compete in the Miss USA pageant, but she didn't win. From here, Joyce moved to Utah. Now she moved to go to graduate school. By this point, Joyce had developed a very keen eye for men. She would flirt, she would chat, she would hang out in cafes, looking for guys her own age to connect with. Interesting fact here about Joyce. Joyce had decided that she wanted to marry one of the Osmond brothers. Wayne Osmond. I don't even really know who Wayne is. I only really know Donnie and Marie. Even then, I say I know them. I kind of could maybe, yeah. If you showed me a picture of them, I think I'd know who they were, but I also couldn't name you a single Osmond song. But anyway, she decided that Wayne Osmond was the man she was going to marry. So she was actually attending the same church as the Osmond family. However, the matriarch of the Osmond family, Mama Osmond, put a stop to any of Joyce's ideas. She wasn't happy with the idea that Joyce would be married into her family. So Joyce had to rethink her plans. Here's where the narrative that will become Joyce McKinney's begins to take shape. She meets a man called Kirk Anderson. Kirk was a Mormon and he took this very seriously. But him and Joyce, they fell for each other very quickly. By the second date, he was proposing to Joyce. They were talking about the future family that they were going to have. And pretty soon, they were having sex. Now, as I just told you, that's not the Mormon way. Kirk Anderson was so overcome with guilt at having broken the rules and having sex outside of marriage that he went to his bishop to discuss this. So here's Joyce. She's thinking, I've met the man of my dreams. We're going to get married. We're going to have kids. Life sorted. The next thing Joyce knows is this. Kirk vanishes. She says, he didn't leave me. He didn't end the relationship. He didn't come and say, I'm sorry, it's over. He just vanished into thin air. So, where was Kirk? Well, Joyce was so intent on answering this question that she hired a private investigator to find out. Now, it doesn't take long before the private investigator comes back and he says, I've tracked him down. He's in England. He's just outside of London. His bishop has placed him there. on a mission after Kirk's sex confession. Joyce is both livid and relieved all at once. She knows where he is, but she's also furious that he has been, as she puts it, taken in by the cult. So what does Joyce do? She does this. She puts together a team of people, including herself, who will go to England and get Kirk out of the cult that she believes he is a part of. So, who does Joyce enlist to the gang? First, she calls on the help of her long-time friend, a man known as KJ. KJ, Joyce describes as being like a big brother to her. She'd known KJ a long time. They were close friends, so she enlists KJ. Second of all, Joyce decides... Now, I'm going to say this, because some of the decisions that Joyce makes here are just fucking bonkers. Joyce decides she's going to need a pilot. Where she's getting the money from, I have absolutely no idea. It's a complete mystery. Anyway, she decides that she's going to enlist a pilot. She actually puts an advert in the newspaper looking for a pilot. She words it as something like, I need a pilot to go on some secret mission. She makes it sound almost like James Bond spy-like. So, So a guy named Jackson, he sees the advert and he thinks, yeah, okay, that sounds like some interesting work. Yeah, I'm happy to fly to England. I'll do that. Let's go. So he goes to her flat, and when he gets there, Joyce is wearing, the pilot goes there, Joyce is wearing a see-through blouse, and she's saying to him, I'm a model, and my boyfriend has been taken. He's been taken to England, and I have to go and get him back. Now the pilot kind of fancies her a bit at this point. He describes it as very alluring and very sexual. He agrees to go along because he's like, oh God, this poor woman, who I slightly fancy, but this poor woman has had her boyfriend taken away from her to England. So therefore, yeah, I'll do this. I'll be the pilot that gets them there. The final person to be added to the gang she puts together is a bodyguard named Gil. So before they can fly out, the four who will travel, they make a stop somewhere near the beach. Just, I think it's close to the airport that they're going to fly out from. So this is the day before they're going to fly out. Joyce says, okay, we're going to fly out tomorrow, so let's spend today at the beach. That's fine. So they all turn up at the beach. Turns out it's a nudist beach. Joyce has no problem with just whipping off her clothes and lying on the beach. And pretty soon, loads of different guys start to approach Joyce lying on the beach. And at one point, there's 5-6 guys all round where Joyce is lying. And they're taking photographs of her, and she's having fun, and it's all very, there's Joyce, she's naked, la la, very fun. And then all of a sudden, she flips out and starts saying, I'm a model. I've got to protect myself. She puts on her clothes, and they have to run away from the beach really quickly. And this story comes from Jackson, the pilot, who was like, this is really odd, because going to a nudist beach, she was inviting this kind of thing. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was happy when all these guys were coming round her and looking at her and taking photographs, and then all of a sudden she just switched, and it had to be under her rules at that moment. This is just I'm just telling you this story about the nudist beach because I think it's really important about kind of how Joyce operates in the future. So with all the plans in motion, off they go. They fly using Joyce's money. They fly to England. When they get there, Gil, the security guard, he starts to have a bad feeling about the trip. He says he's just not sure that Joyce has ever been that upfront. He says he thinks there's something that he doesn't quite know, something in the background giving him an uneasy feeling. Now he's saying this to Jackson, the pilot. So he leaves with just that feeling that something isn't right. He heads back to America. So that leaves the three of them. So you've got Joyce, you've got KJ, and you've got the pilot. The pilot, Jackson, he begins to feel the same thing. He starts thinking, I don't think I've been given the full story here. Now, bear in mind, all he knows is Joyce's boyfriend has been taken to England, and she needs to go and get him back. But he's wanting more details. He wants more information. One of the things that he is suspicious about is the fact that Joyce travelled with so much luggage. I think it was something in the region of about 13 suitcases. And one day, they're in the room that they're staying in, and he looks inside one of the bags, and he sees that it's filled with recording devices. It's filled with microphones, wires, lots of equipment that you would use to tap rooms, and it starts to alarm him. Anyway, he sort of carries on with the plan. He's asking Joyce for more details. She's not really too forthcoming. So Joyce's search for Kirk, she's got some leads, and she's got a few places to visit where she thinks Kirk might be. But what is Joyce's plan to find him? Well, the plan is this. She will drive around to all the places that he might be, all the places that the private investigator has said that he might have been spotted. She will stay in the car with her secret devices, and KJ will go in to all of these places, be it a restaurant, a cafe, wherever, where Kirk might have been spotted, and try and find him. He will be wearing some sort of device, and Joyce will be in the car listening for every little bit of conversation that KJ is having. So Jackson, the pilot, he's along for the ride with lots of these searches. And one night, Joyce has a tip that Kirk might be attending a service in a church nearby, and so off the three of them go. They arrive at this church, they wait outside for 2 hours, and what do they see? They see Kirk leaving the building, talking freely with another Mormon, and Joyce is delighted. Here he is. She's gone to all of this effort, and he has appeared. So Jackson, the pilot, says to her at this point, "This doesn't look much to me like a man who's been kidnapped. It doesn't look right." And Joyce says, "Well, I've not been totally honest." And she starts to explain that actually Kirk is a Mormon, and he's been sent overseas on a mission, and that she's come back to get him. In one of the bags that they have in the car, she shows Jackson that she has chloroform, a fake gun, and some rope. At which point Jackson, quite naturally, as I would, says no thanks and gets the fuck out of there. He wants nothing to do with it. Quite right, my man. Get out of there. Get to fuck. If someone showed me a bag that had chloroform, a fake gun, and some rope, I'd be fucking running for the hills. So he knows at this point, and he's already had this feeling for a long time. This bad, suspicious feeling about Joyce. But he's like, nah, you've shown me these, I'm out of here. So he actually goes back, he gets the plane that he flew them there on, and he fucks off back to America. He leaves Joyce and KJ in the UK. Good on him. Now, what happens next? There are two versions of what happens next, but essentially the outcome is the same. So it doesn't really matter which of these two versions are real, the outcome's the same. The first version is that they now know where Kirk is and that KJ poses as someone interested in becoming a Mormon, and he organises a meet with Kirk, and says, can I meet you the next day, and I would like to talk to you about becoming part of the Church of Latter-day Saints. And the story goes that they meet, and at that point KJ says, that's not actually why I wanted to meet you. I wanted to meet you because I'm here with Joyce. Would you just come to the car, because she's outside, and talk to her for a couple of minutes? And Kirk agrees. That's version 1. Version 2 isn't so devious, and it's a bit more direct. Version 2, KJ goes to the church at night, waits for Kirk to come out, points a gun at him, and says, you're coming with me, and he marches him to the vehicle in which Joyce is. Now, either way, whichever of those happened, the end result is the same. It ends with Kirk being kidnapped. He is tied up, he's put in the back seat of the car, and he's driven 250 miles away from where he is. That is some distance. For fuck's sake, 250 miles. So, Joyce, KJ, and tied up Kirk, they head towards Devon. Devon's a very beautiful part of England, if you don't know it. Devon is all countryside and animals, and it's absolutely gorgeous. What's about to happen in the cottage that Joyce has rented in Devon? Not so gorgeous, not so nice at all. Joyce and KJ, they've stored their bags in the cottage. Joyce had picked this place out weeks before. She knew it was deep in the country, it was away from prying eyes, and really secluded. So for 3 months, she had this place rented, and she'd paid for it up front. Once inside the cottage, Kirk is freed from the ropes that he was tied in the car, but worse is to come. Kirk is chained to the bed in the main bedroom of the cottage, and this is where he'll stay for the next few days. With heavy chains, his arms are tied above his head, and his feet are tied to the bottom of the bed. There is a suitcase in the room. This belongs to Joyce, and it contains lots of sex equipment. There's whips, handcuffs, bondage gear, more ropes, more chains, the lot. So, what happens over the next few days? Well, this. KJ makes himself scarce, and Joyce begins her sexual journey with Kirk. She determines that she will break Kirk of the spell he is under, the cult brainwashing of the Mormons. And the way that she does this is to take his Mormon chastity clothing from him and burn it in a fireplace in the cottage. Now, this is huge to a Mormon. The correct name for it is temple garment, and it's a white outfit. You'll have seen it. You'll have seen images of it. It's a white outfit that's worn under clothing, and it's white to symbolise purity. The garment, according to Mormon tradition, when worn properly, provides protection against temptation and evil. One of the documents I read said, wearing the garment is also an outward expression of an inward commitment to follow Jesus Christ. A Mormon will add that the garment strengthens the wearer to resist temptation, fend off evil influences, and stand firmly for the right. Well, clearly that means fuck all to Joyce. When Joyce gets involved, it gets ripped off of Kirk's body and it gets burned in a fire. She wants what's underneath that temple garment and she will not stop until she gets to it. So she is attempting to have sex with Kirk. There he is, lying on the bed, completely naked, chained to it, garments burned. This gets us into a very, very, very tricky area. Male rape, male sexual assault. So he's chained to the bed. Joyce has the complete control of his body at this point. So she's trying to have sex with him at first, and it's not working. She describes, and it actually made my stomach flip when I heard her describe it like this. It's so horrible. She says the first few attempts were like trying to put a marshmallow into a parking meter. Oh, what the fuck? It's horrible. Oh, it's just horrible. But there are lots of questions having to be asked here. And I could go down the whole rabbit hole that is male sexual assault and male rape. But I realised I started to do some research on this, and the law is so blurry between what is involved and what isn't involved. I mean, we'll agree, Joyce, yes, there is sexual assault here. Joyce is just completely and utterly out of order. You don't chain someone to a bed completely naked and not call that sexual assault. But Joyce, as we will see as her story goes, she's not one to give up. And she persists. And she persists. And eventually, Kirk begins to respond. And when I say respond, what I mean is he gets to the point where he's hard enough for actual sex to happen. But he starts to freak out. He starts singing hymns. He starts saying prayers. And Joyce, rather than thinking, oh God, I'm putting this guy through the most horrific experience. I'm putting him through something terrible where he's having to say prayers and he's having to sing hymns. She thinks, haha, it's working. I'm breaking the spell. Crazy. Fucking crazy. So, Joyce thinks that the Mormons have made him sexually repressed. And this is what she's going to do to change it. She gets a Christian manual, a guide to sex. And she tells Kirk that it says in the manual, being chained to a bed with no option but to have sex, that's actually a freeing experience. And actually, that's a good thing for him. Sure, he's lying there thinking, yeah, whatever, fuck off, crazy. I'm sure he's not actually believing anything that she's saying. Now, I'm pretty sure Joyce is complete batshit crazy. But there is evidence of people who enjoy bondage, who enjoy to be tied up. And yeah, they will say that actually being tied up, it does free you up sexually. Having your powers taken away can be a really pleasing experience. Not sure for Kirk that was what he was feeling. So Kirk begins to, according to Joyce, willingly have sex with her. She says that over the next few days they have lots of sex, and eventually she lets him out of the chains. Now he's out of the chains. He's free. Does he run? No, he doesn't. He says to Joyce that they should get married. Okay, Kirk. Sure. Yeah, not sure if someone had kidnapped me, driven me 250 miles away and put me in a cottage and chained me to a bed, I would be going, great, yeah, let's get married. That sounds like the grounds for a wonderful marriage. Anyway, Joyce and Kirk, they make a plan to leave the cottage and head towards London. And the idea is that they will get to London and they will marry. So they set off with KJ along for the ride. What's KJ been up to in the cottage? He's actually just made himself scarce. He's just gone to the other bit of the cottage and let Joyce carry on doing what she needed to do for those few days. So they go to London, and here's the first thing that happens when they get there. They see a newspaper within the first 10 minutes of being in London, and on the front page they see a headline that says, "Mormon kidnapped by crazed sex fiend girlfriend." There's pictures of Joyce, there's pictures of Kirk, and they are on the front of every newspaper. This was a huge news story, and neither of them had a clue that this was happening. So what did they do? They phone their parents. Kirk phones Joyce's dad and he says, "I'm going to marry her." Okay, fine. Right? So each of the sets of their parents now know that they're both alive and that the plan is they're going to marry. Okay, fine. Kirk says to Joyce, "Look, this whole thing is a mess, right? It's gotten out of hand. We're now in the papers. It's just silly. Let me go back to my church. I'll speak to my brothers, and within a couple of days, I'll be back here in London, just a matter of days, and we'll get married." Now, Joyce is not delighted by this plan. She's concocted this plan to break him of the Mormon connection, and now it's getting in the way again. But she thinks, maybe I should actually just let him go back, because he's going to go back and he's going to say, "Look, don't want to be a Mormon anymore. I'm leaving and I'm going back to marry Joyce." So she says, "Okay, that's fine. On you go. I'll see you in a few days." They go to King's Cross Station in London. Kirk boards the train. He gives Joyce a kiss. Joyce would only ever see Kirk once more in her lifetime, and it would be many years later. So the story has hit the news in a pretty big way. Joyce and Kirk, their photographs are all over the newspapers at this point. It's a real story of interest. The Mormon who was kidnapped by his sex fiend girlfriend and chained to a bed. So Kirk's gone away, saying that he's going to go back and he's going to speak to the church and that they're going to get married. And she gets a phone call from him a few days later, and he says, "I still love you and I would like to meet you." So they arrange a time and a place to meet, and it's while Joyce is with KJ and they're on their way to meet Kirk at the agreed time that they're pulled over by police and arrested. So there's so many crimes here for her to be arrested on. There's kidnap, there's pointing a gun at someone, there's chaining someone to a bed, there's forcing sex on someone. There's so many charges against her. So, there's two different versions of the story really here. The way that it's being reported is, did he set up her arrest? Was this actually part of his plan when he got back to the church? Did they say, "Okay, let's get this woman arrested, so say that you're going to arrange to meet her and we'll get her arrested"? Or did he actually want to meet Joyce at this point, and it just happens that police intercepted on the way to the meeting? I'm more likely to believe the first. I think Kirk just wanted Joyce away from him at this point. I think as much as she thinks she broke his Mormon beliefs during those days when he was chained to a bed, I don't really think that she did at all. The other question that was being posed in the press is, was Joyce just a woman so in love that she just acted in complete craziness? I don't know. So when Joyce had been arrested, she spent 3 months in Holloway Women's Prison. Holloway Women's Prison in London is the same place that Myra Hindley was at. It's a very famous high security prison. What Joyce does next, I just think it's insane. She goes to the prison library. She finds a piece of blank paper in the back of a book, and she writes a letter to the press. So on one of the days when she is being taken from prison to court to have the hearings back and forth to see what's going to eventually happen. This is like long before like her trial. This is just the hearing stages. She takes the little note that she'd written to the press, and she manages, through a little crack in the window of the van that she's in, she manages to flick it out into the street, and it lands next to a man who's watching the prison van move. Because as I said, remember, Joyce is big news at this point. So there's news reporters everywhere. There's photographers everywhere. So she flicks this piece of paper out, and it lands next to a man who is a journalist. And he picks up the piece of paper, and she's like pointing at it. She's like saying to him, like, look at it, see what it says. And very clearly she's written, this needs to go to a national newspaper. And this is Joyce trying to get her side of the story out. She's trying to say that Kirk came with her willingly, that she didn't kidnap him. She didn't actually point a gun at him. It's all bullshit. Yes, she did. But she's trying to say, no, I didn't. He wanted to come with her. So her bail hearing arrives, and Joyce takes absolute centre stage. Her performance in the court is called mesmerising. In court, when Kirk is asked about the days of kidnap and the days of having sex unwillingly, he doesn't really give a very concrete answer to that. Instead, he looks over at his fellow Mormons who are staring at him intently, as if you have to say that she forced sex on you unwillingly and that you didn't want this. So Joyce, big news. She's a big celebrity at this point. She's taken back to prison for a short time, and then at a second bail hearing, she's allowed out. And this is where a real level of fame for Joyce begins. She starts going to parties with people like John Travolta, the Bee Gees. She starts turning up at like movie premieres. She's becoming like a proper celebrity. Well, not a proper celebrity. She's becoming one of these like shitty, I don't know, Kardashian hanger-on type celebrities. Do you know what I mean? But she's got a status at this point. Probably in Britain at the time, you couldn't have said the name Joyce McKinney without everybody knowing who you were talking about. Joyce then completely vanishes into thin air. She just disappears. How does she do it? Well, I'm going to tell you. Joyce gets hold of 2 birth certificates of dead people. She buys a wig and a fat suit. And using the fake birth certificate, wearing a wig and a fat suit, she applies for travel documents to fly from the UK to Canada. KJ, who's still with her, she dresses him up with a false moustache, and she darkens his skin. I think it's like a fake tan thing, where she basically makes him look like a completely different ethnicity. I mean, what the fuck? It's so bizarre. He looks completely different, and she's wearing a wig and a fat suit. The whole thing is fucking ridiculous. So they're trying to get a flight from the UK back to Canada. She's got these fake documents using these fake birth certificates. Honestly, this woman is fucking off her nuts, man. So they're in the airport, and they're still not sure they're going to get away with it. So she can't be recognised from all the pictures that are in the papers, but she's still nervous that something is going to flag up and it's going to say, sorry, you're actually Joyce McKinney. You're actually the woman who chained a man to a bed. We know who you are. So In the airport, she discovers that there is a troupe of deaf actors and they're travelling from London to Canada. And Joyce gets herself an idea. So what she does is, she gets a little piece of paper, she writes a note on it, and she attaches it to her jacket. And the note says, I am deaf. I can lip read, so please articulate properly, although I may not understand everything that you're going to say. And unbelievably, this actually works for Joyce, because as she's going through, she's still, as I said earlier, she's got these masses of suitcases, right? She's still got like 13 suitcases. This time, one of them is just full of newspaper cuttings about herself, about everything that's happened. She's got a full suitcase full of it. And the woman who is, putting them all through at the airport, she tries to have a conversation with Joyce. Joyce just keeps pointing at the little thing on her jacket that says, I'm deaf and I can't really understand. It's late at night. The woman can't really, in all honesty, she can't really be bothered trying to understand why there's so many cases and what's going on. She just lets Joyce through. So there you go. So Joyce gets to go to Canada pretending, wearing a wig, a fat suit and pretending to be deaf. I'm telling you, genius madness. This is the thing I'm talking about earlier on. She's on that. Do you know what I mean? That's a pretty ballsy move. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, she gets to Canada. She phones the biggest newspaper in the UK at the time, the Daily Express. She calls it from Canada and she says, I want to sell my story, but I want £40,000 to tell my story. And the Daily Express, they go, yeah, great. You are of such interest to us that is a deal. So we're going to send a journalist to meet you right now in Canada. So the next day, a journalist hops on a flight over to Canada to meet Joyce. He gets to the airport at the time he's meant to meet Joyce. And he's looking around and he can't quite see Joyce anywhere. Instead, what he sees is an old Indian woman and an old Indian man. Now, he describes them as being dressed as if they'd just come from like the poorest part of Calcutta. Their clothes are in rags, they're dirty, their hair is long, messy. This is Joyce and KJ in another one of Joyce's wonderful disguises. Joyce basically just kept a suitcase full of every piece of shit in the world that you could use as a disguise at any point. Fucking crazy, man. She's insane. At this point, I think it's worth pausing to just ask, what's KJ's angle in all of this? Why is KJ still with Joyce? He's been through a lot with her in this past little while. Why is he still hanging about? Well, the journalist who flew to Canada, the one who found them dressed as two old Indian people, says he believes that actually what was going on there is not a necessarily sexual relationship, but definitely something along the lines of a master-slave type relationship. So some form of a bondage relationship, but possibly not sexual, possibly sexual, no one really knows, but that definitely Joyce was the sort of dominatrix role within it, and that KJ was along for the ride because he was in some way Joyce's slave. So that's just his idea on it. But it does interest me because as I was reading the story, I kept thinking, why is this guy KJ sticking with her? Why is he still about? So the UK newspapers, they go into overdrive about Joyce. They decide they're going to dig up her past, her call girl days. So this is what comes to light, is that Joyce used to be paid for sex. This is pre-meeting Kirk. This is pre the kidnap. This is days before this. They managed to hunt down an ex-boyfriend of Joyce's from years ago, and he leads them to millions of glamour photographs that she had done. He leads them to an advert in the newspaper which Joyce had put in offering massage services. Massage services while she was nude. She, in his advert, said, "Your fantasy is my speciality. Phone sex, bondage, erotic photographs, underwear, anything you like." When Joyce discovered that this advert had been found, she flipped out. She absolutely flipped out. She couldn't believe this had been unearthed about her. And the newspapers were just continuing all the time to discover more and more and more from her past. So Joyce's trial, it's still looming in the distance. She's in Canada. She's going to be tried in the UK. It's still looming, but this is all being dragged up by the newspapers. Joyce claims it's all fake. None of it's true. I didn't place that advert. That's not me topless in all those photographs. That's not me performing a sex act in that photograph. And the journalists at the time were like, it is. We have thousands upon thousands of images of you performing sex. Yes, this is you. We didn't fake thousands of photographs. These are you. Joyce, she starts to become obsessed by checking the newspapers. She flips out at the stories that they're starting to publish. When she sees the photographs of her actually performing a sex act, she freaks out. She becomes hysterical. And one night, in her hotel room in Canada, she tries to jump off of the hotel balcony, but it's KJ who stops her. So she's taken to the hospital and she is sedated. Her mum and dad appear in the hospital. Her dad goes in to give her a hug and she bites her dad in the arm. She bites him so deeply that blood starts pouring out of his arm. So after the bite, she gets up and she runs from the hospital, wearing only her hospital nightgown with completely bare feet. She runs into the night. Eventually, a few hours later, they find Joyce. She's just wandering around the streets at this point, barefoot, in a nightie, in a rage. She's become absolutely unhinged at this point. So they take her, and what the authorities do is they say, well, you're going to have to live with your mum and dad, and we're going to need to put you on a curfew at this point because your behaviour is just completely outrageous. We fear for you, we fear for your life, we fear for everything. So basically we're just going to have to put you in a curfew with your mum and dad. So I said the trial was still looming, but Joyce was never, I find this so bizarre, she was never extradited back to the UK. The charges of rape were dropped. The charges of kidnapping were dropped. And in her absence, while she wasn't there, a court in the UK tried Joyce while she's not there, and they gave her 1 year in prison for everything that she had done, for the time that she took Kirk from a church, kidnapped him, drove him 250 miles and chained him to a bed and forced him to have sex. She got 1 year in prison. I might add that during that 1 year in prison, she struck a deal with Penthouse magazine to sell her life story with added photographs. Oh, fuck this woman. So, what happened to Kirk? Kirk moved on from the experience and he married a woman. He has a good job. He works in an airport in Utah. So Joyce, after her year in prison, she got out and she had money by this point. She'd made money from this. She'd made a lot of money out of this whole case. She wasn't necessarily a celebrity anymore, but people still knew who Joyce was. Unfortunately, she was agoraphobic. She had a fear now of going outside, but a fear of really large groups of people, places where there might be photographers or there might be the possibility that her life would be intruded upon. So she's living in a big kind of expansive area in Utah. Now this next little bit of Joyce's story is pretty horrible. It's pretty horrible if you're an animal lover. Even if you're not, it's still pretty horrible. She gets herself a guard dog because although she's out of the limelight and, she's not living in England, she's back in the USA, people still know who Joyce McKinney is. And people still look at her and think, you're that sex fiend. You're that woman who chained a man to a bed. You're that evil temptress. Joyce, I will say, hadn't done much to help herself during that time. She did plenty photo shoots where, she had a snake wrapped around her neck while she had, her breasts out. She was courting an awful lot of that. So I'm not going to say, she can't really play the victim that much. She did kind of court it. Anyway, she's now trying to live a slightly quieter life. But so she got herself a guard dog called Tough Guy, who was a pit bull. And unfortunately, the dog was stung by a bee. And so the dog was getting some medication from the local pharmacy. And two of the women who worked in the local pharmacy, they thought it would be funny because they knew this was Joyce McKinney's dog. Why they thought this would be funny, I don't fucking know. They thought it would be funny to give the dog a stronger prescription of drugs, knowing that actually this would send the dog a little bit crazy. And it did. The pit bull attacked Joyce, ripped off 3 of her fingers. Her left arm had to be completely rebuilt. And the dog attacked her back and damaged her intestines. What the fuck? Nothing ever happened to the 2 women who thought that was okay to give that dog a horrible dosage of medication. Fucking hell. The reason I include this bit of the story with Joyce, because I could have just ended it a minute ago, but actually it's interesting because the next bit of Joyce's life kind of again just consolidates the kind of person that she is. That attack didn't stop Joyce from being a dog lover. She picked up a little stray dog one day and she called the dog Booger. She became obsessed with Booger. This was her favourite dog she'd ever had. She loved this wee thing. And it died. So, when it died, Joyce reached out to a Korean doctor who was an expert in cloning. He was trying to make some big strides in the cloning world. So she reached out to him and she said, could you possibly clone my dog? My dog that's just died. And this Korean doctor said, well, I could definitely give it a go if you have the money to fund this. And Joyce said, yes, I have the money to fund this. Let's try it. So they did it. And it was successful. They managed to clone Booger, her dog, and 5 different puppies were born, all of which now live with Joyce. So she was the first person to ever make dog cloning a thing. Now, during the whole entire thing, what's really weird is it gets a lot of press. It starts to get really huge attention because the world is like, oh my god, dog cloning has happened. This is insane. Here is the woman who has funded this. Here is the Korean doctor who's made this happen. And somewhere along the way, a journalist looks at it and goes, is that Joyce McKinney? I think that's Joyce. And she's like, no. It's not, no. I'm not Joyce McKinney. What are you talking about? No. I'm just a woman who loves her dog. And the press are like, no, you haven't really changed that much since you were Madame Mayhem back in the day. You're Joyce McKinney. And eventually she has to go, oh yeah, actually, sorry. Yeah, I was kidding on. I actually am Joyce McKinney. So yeah, so she's now got these 5 dogs cloned from the dead dog that she loved. Joyce never married, and she never really had any big, substantial relationships in her life. So there was a documentary made of Joyce's story, and it's called Tabloid. It's on Netflix. You can find it anywhere. I think there's a lot of controversy now because I think Joyce is trying to sue the people who made the documentary for making out that she was a prostitute. Well, you know, she can do that all that she likes, but if you're going to place adverts in a newspaper that say your fantasy is my speciality, be it bondage, be it whatever, you know, the line between that and prostitution and the fact that she was actually paid for sex is it's a very blurry line, and yeah, that's Joyce's thing to fight. What I do love is that when that documentary was screened, when it was first screened, Joyce went along to the screening. Here she goes again, in a disguise. She went along wearing a wig. She sat through the whole thing, and at the end, she sat in the front row. She jumped up and she shouted, "I'm Joyce McKinney!" And everyone in the audience was like, "What? What? Okay, right, hiya." And she then went round all the people who had watched the screening and was like, "Hi, yes, that's me. Yep, everything you just watched, that's my life." So you're like, well, simultaneously, you can't jump up at a screening and shout, "Here you go, that's my life," and also be like, "Oh no, actually I'm going to sue you because you've completely and utterly misrepresented me." So, KJ died in 2004 of kidney failure, but him and Joyce had remained good friends up until he died. So, I said earlier that Joyce had only ever seen Kirk once more in her life. And that was randomly in a supermarket. Joyce was out one day, shopping in Utah. She's walking around the aisles. She sees a man and a woman come towards her down the aisle, and she realises the man is Kirk. The woman with Kirk is his wife. Joyce says she looked at him and realised she still loved him as much as she loved him all of those years ago. They looked at each other and then they walked past each other. No conversation happened between them. Joyce McKinney, to this day, will say that her and Kirk Anderson is one of the greatest love stories ever known. And so ends the story of Joyce McKinney, Madame Mayhem. Okay, right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story. I really enjoyed researching this story. What a fuck up. What just bonkers, just totally crazy. It threw up loads for me to think about. I'm still on my genius madness thing. It's something I've thought about for so long. In other people, and they say that people like Kurt Cobain were genius madness, and there's I don't know if you know Tori Amos, the singer. People will often say she's genius madness. Anyway, there's millions of it. There's millions of examples. I think Joyce's story is just bonkers. It's just crazy. There's so much going on in it, and I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you want to get in touch with me, please do. It's Extraordinary Stories Podcast on Facebook and on Instagram. You can, of course, join the Facebook group. It's the happening place to be. If you want to get me on Twitter, it's at Extra Stories Pod. Thank you. I meant to say this earlier on. Thank you so much to the new Patreon subscribers. I really am very grateful. I realise there's a lot of shit going on with Patreon at the moment, and a lot of podcasts are up in arms about it. I am as angry as anybody about the changes, and if I can work it out that it's not going to cost you any extra money, or if you need to change your pledge that you're giving me every month, I would much rather you do that than you be out of pocket. I would never, ever, ever have that. I'm so grateful for every Patreon penny that comes my way, because honestly, that's just, as someone who podcasts as something that I do within my entire working life. You know, I have a whole other working life, but the podcast is my passion. It's my absolute passion. So if you are giving through Patreon, please know I absolutely 100% love that you're giving through Patreon, and I'm really sorry that they've changed the fucking rules and started to charge in ridiculous ways. So if I can move to somewhere else that might make that not have an impact on you, that's what I will do, if it just makes everyone's life easier. What else was I going to say? Oh, yes, another thing. I know I put this on the group, but if you haven't listened to the podcast Emma Filipoff is Missing, then I would seriously recommend that as a listen. I think it's so bloody good. It's from the LA Times. It's just wonderful. I've been really loving it. Emma Filipoff is one of those extremely bizarre missing persons cases that's just odd, and it's quite haunting, and it's sad, and it's dark. And this podcast, I think, is in 6 parts. It's really lovely listening. It's quite reflective listening at points. You just kind of get lost in it. It's really nice. So if you haven't listened to it, I would highly recommend that you give it a go. Alright, okay. I think that's about it from me. So it's been lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, and as always, if you know a great story and you know an extraordinary story, get in touch. Okay? Goodbye.